What happens when a billionaire CEO sees one of his youngest employees crying alone in a walk-in freezer? He doesn't walk away, he listens. Cameron Daniels sat quietly in his office, staring at the performance report for Store 19. Out of all 19 locations he inherited from his late father, this one was the only one consistently underperforming. Sales were down, employee turnover was high, and customer reviews had tanked over the last 6 months. He had brought in consultants, shuffled district staff, even offered bonuses to the store manager to improve things, but nothing worked. He didn't want to admit it, but it was starting to feel personal. His assistant, Lee, knocked and peeked her head in. "Cam, that location's bleeding money now." "You really want to keep trying with them?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, but not from up here. Wait, you're going in? I need to see what's really going on. No more filtered updates." Store 19 was a mid-sized fast food restaurant on the edge of a suburban strip in Indiana. Busy enough to stay open, but not busy enough to hide problems. Cameron had never visited it in person. He inherited the whole chain at 29 when his father passed unexpectedly, and he'd spent the last 2 years trying to modernize systems and improve working conditions. But he had stayed distant from the stores themselves. He knew that now. He shaved his full beard, traded his tailored suit for khakis and a polo, and put on a pair of thick glasses. He looked completely different. No one at Store 19 had ever met him, and since the business was a corporate chain, his face wasn't plastered on the walls or anything. He'd be going in as Kyle, a new hire sent by another location to help during their staff shortage. That part was real. Store 19 had lost 4 workers in 2 weeks. 2 quit, 1 was let go after a no-call, no-show streak, and 1 just stopped showing up after being yelled at in front of customers. The district manager blamed a weak work ethic in the new generation. Cameron wasn't so sure. He walked through the employee entrance just before lunch rush. The manager on duty, a short, wiry man with sharp eyes, greeted him with a nod. "You Kyle?" the man asked, not looking up from his phone. "Yeah, first day. Put your stuff in the break room. I'll get someone to show you around." "I'm Nate, store manager." The tone was flat. No welcome, no warmth, just get in, do your job. In the kitchen, a girl about 20 with tied-back brown hair and a small frame waved him over. "Hey, I'm Fallon. I'll train you on prep." She was focused, fast, and organized. Cameron noticed she handled most of the orders herself while 2 other workers leaned on the counter chatting. Fallon didn't complain, she just kept going. "You always this short on people?" he asked quietly while slicing lettuce. Fallon gave a tight smile. "Lately, yeah, people quit a lot. I'm just trying to survive the shift." He worked the rest of lunch with her. No one talked much. Nate barked from the front every few minutes, yelling if orders were late. At one point, a teenage boy dropped a tray, and Nate made him clean it in front of customers while muttering, "Maybe if your generation had an ounce of work ethic." Cameron clenched his jaw but said nothing. After the rush, Fallon handed him a crate of frozen items. "Can you help me restock the freezer?" He followed her to the back where the walk-in freezer stood. She opened the door, stepped inside, and started stacking boxes on shelves. He grabbed a few and followed. The cold air hit hard, then she stopped. Her hands dropped to her sides. She turned away quickly, shoulders shaking. "Hey," Cameron said, lowering the box. "You okay?" She wiped her face but didn't turn around. "I'm fine, sorry, give me a second." He hesitated, then stepped closer. "It's freezing in here. If something's wrong, you don't have to pretend it's not." Fallon finally looked at him, eyes red. "I've been working doubles for 2 weeks. My mom's sick, I'm helping with bills, and Nate said if I call off again, I'm fired. I just needed 5 minutes. I just needed to breathe." Cameron felt a knot twist in his gut. "Wait, he said he'd fire you," she nodded. "I called off once. My mom had a seizure, I told him. He said everyone has problems, and if I couldn't handle pressure, I should quit." Cameron stared at her, stunned. "That's not right." "No one cares," she whispered. "It's not just me. He treats everyone like trash, but we need the paycheck, so we take it." He stood in the cold silence, watching her wipe her face again and straighten her back like she hadn't just fallen apart. That freezer door felt heavier than anything he'd lifted all day. And for the first time since taking over this company, Cameron Daniels felt ashamed. Cameron walked out of the freezer with Fallon and didn't say another word. She kept her eyes down. He let her move ahead toward the front while he hung back, pretending to organize stock in the dry pantry. In truth, he needed a moment to collect himself. What he'd just heard, it wasn't just a mismanaged store, it was neglect, plain and simple. And Nate wasn't just tough, he was abusive. Back on the floor, the atmosphere hadn't changed. The two guys who had been chatting earlier were now half-heartedly cleaning the drink station. One of them, tall with a buzz cut, laughed as he tossed an empty syrup box onto the ground instead of the bin. The shorter one didn't even flinch. "Can you not?" Cameron asked, walking past. The tall one raised his eyebrows. "New guy wants to talk." Cameron didn't respond. He picked up the box and threw it away himself. The guy just rolled his eyes and went back to leaning on the counter. Fallon had returned to the grill, her hands moving on autopilot. Nate had reappeared behind the cash register, loudly comparing two customers' orders and making exaggerated comments about how people don't know how to read a menu anymore. The customers laughed nervously. Cameron stepped in to help bag orders while Fallon handled cooking. She moved with precision, but her posture was stiff, like she was bracing for something to go wrong at any second. After the rush, Nate called out, "Fallon, you're staying through close. No one else here knows how to handle the Friday night crowd." She didn't answer right away. "You deaf?" Nate said louder. "I worked a double yesterday," she said, still facing the fryer. "That's not what I asked." Cameron turned slightly. "You've got 3 other people on the schedule." Nate looked at him slowly. "You've been here 5 minutes. Don't tell me how to run this place." Cameron held his gaze, then turned back to wiping the prep counter. He needed to stay in character for now. Later that afternoon, a middle-aged woman came in with her teenage daughter. They ordered at the kiosk, and when they approached the counter to ask for extra sauce, Nate didn't even look up from his phone. "Excuse me," the woman said. "Sorry, I just need." Nate sighed audibly. "Try using the kiosk like everyone else." "I did," she replied, startled. "I'm just asking for barbecue and ranch." Nate tossed 2 sauces onto the counter without looking. The daughter reached for them, and he said, "We charge for extra." "They were part of the combo," the woman said quietly. "Not my problem." "Next." The woman walked away, clearly embarrassed. Fallon glanced at Cameron, then quietly grabbed more sauce packets and slipped them into the woman's bag before handing it over with a quick, "Have a good afternoon." The woman gave her a grateful nod and left. At the end of the shift, Cameron followed Fallon into the break room. She was sitting at the table, unwrapping a protein bar with hands that were trembling slightly. "You really staying through close?" he asked. She nodded without looking up. "I need the hours. Even if it wrecks you," she shrugged. "Doesn't matter, rent's due Monday." He sat across from her. "You ever think about leaving?" "Of course," she said. "But I've got a high school diploma and a car that barely starts, not a lot of options." There was a silence. He noticed the bandages on her knuckles. "Burns, grease flare-up 2 days ago," she said. "No gloves in stock. No gloves. They ran out last week. Nate said corporate takes too long to send more." Cameron's heart sank. He had signed off on an automated inventory system 6 months ago. If gloves hadn't arrived, it meant someone had failed to order them or purposely skipped it. The back door creaked open, and the guy with the buzz cut from earlier stuck his head in. "Yo, Fallon, Nate wants you up front." She stood up silently and walked out. The guy lingered by the door and looked at Cameron. "You're the new guy, right?" "Yeah. You know she's not gonna last, right? She cries in the freezer like every other week." Cameron stood up slowly. "You think that's funny?" the guy shrugged. "I think it's predictable." "What's your name?" "Chase." Cameron nodded once and walked past him without another word. He spent the next hour shadowing another team member, a quiet young man named Isaiah who worked in the back. Isaiah was efficient but barely spoke. He seemed nervous every time Nate walked past. Cameron asked him a few questions about the prep process, and Isaiah answered in short, clipped sentences. When Cameron asked why he didn't talk much, Isaiah just said, "Don't want to say the wrong thing." By the end of the shift, Cameron had seen enough. The staff was barely held together by a thread. Fallon was the only one carrying the store, and she was doing it on an empty tank. The others were either indifferent or actively making things worse. And Nate, he had created a culture of fear and hostility. Cameron returned the next morning, still undercover. He wanted to give it one more day to be absolutely sure. This time, he stayed mostly off the floor and observed from the back. Fallon was back again, eyes heavy, moving slower than the day before. At one point, she accidentally dropped a basket of fries on the floor. Nate yelled from across the room, "Unbelievable." "You mess up one more time today, I swear." Cameron stepped forward. "It was an accident, we've all had them." Nate turned. "You want to cover her shift tonight too, hero?" "No, I want to talk to you, privately." Nate looked him up and down. "Why?" Cameron pulled a folded sheet from his back pocket and handed it to him. It was a printed photo of himself in a suit, the same photo from the company's investor page taken 2 years ago. Nate looked at the photo, then at him. "What is this?" "I'm Cameron Daniels," he said. "I own this company." The room went silent. Fallon froze mid-step. Isaiah, who had been wiping counters, stopped moving altogether. Nate's expression didn't change much. "This is some kind of joke." "No, it isn't." Cameron stepped forward, voice low and controlled. "You berated customers, disrespected staff, and created a toxic environment in a store already struggling. You ignored safety protocols, refused to order basic supplies, and threatened to fire a longtime employee for attending to a medical emergency." Nate opened his mouth, but Cameron cut him off. "You're done. As of this moment, you're terminated. Gather your things and leave." Chase stepped into the doorway. "Wait, what? You two," Cameron said without looking at him. "You mocked a coworker's mental health and contributed nothing to the operation. That's not tolerated in any store I run." Chase's face flushed. "You can't just—" "I can, and I have." Neither of them said another word. Nate walked out first, face pale. Chase followed, mumbling to himself. Cameron turned to the rest of the staff. "I'm not here to scare anyone. But I need you all to know this ends now. No more fear. No more abuse." Fallon stood still for a moment, then slowly sat down at the breakroom table. Cameron looked around. "We're going to fix this. But it starts with honesty. If you've been working in these conditions, I want to hear it. If you've been trying to do your job while others drag you down, I want to know that too." Isaiah raised his hands slightly. "We weren't allowed to take breaks some days. Nate said we didn't earn them." Cameron nodded. "That ends today." He turned to Fallon. "You're not closing tonight. Go home. Rest. You've done more than enough." She looked at him, unsure whether to believe it. When he nodded again, she slowly stood and walked to the back door without a word. As it shut behind her, Cameron looked at the remaining team. Tomorrow's going to be different. "You have my word." And for the first time since he walked in, the room didn't feel cold. The next morning, Cameron arrived at store 19 2 hours before opening. The air outside was still heavy with dew, the strip mall quiet except for the buzz of the streetlights shutting off one by one. He unlocked the employee entrance with his master key and stepped into the back hallway. The silence was thick. No prep noise, no voices, just the faint hum of the fridge units. He took a seat at the breakroom table and opened his laptop. He had already pulled the internal logs, time cards, and supply orders from the past 90 days. And what he saw confirmed what he had suspected. Nate had not only failed to restock basic safety equipment, he had also been falsifying maintenance tickets and inflating hours for Chase, and another now departed employee. Fallon, meanwhile, had clocked 38 hours of overtime in the last 3 weeks unapproved, unacknowledged, and unpaid. He sent 2 emails before the others arrived. One to HR, flagging the falsified time cards for official documentation. The other to operations, instructing them to overnight a full supply restock and a temporary manager from the training division. By 7:30, Isaiah walked in. His expression shifted when he saw Cameron already seated, wearing a corporate polo this time instead of the generic crew shirt. "You're not Kyle, are you?" "No," Cameron said. "And I'm sorry for not being honest with you yesterday." Isaiah set his backpack down slowly. "So, you really own the place?" "I own the company, which means I'm responsible for how this place runs." "That includes what you've been dealing with." Isaiah stood quietly, not quite sure what to do with his hands. "You're the first one in today," Cameron said. "Do you mind if we talk for a minute before things get going?" Isaiah nodded cautiously and sat across from him. "What's been the hardest part of working here?" Isaiah glanced at the breakroom door, then rubbed the side of his thumb. "Honestly, just not knowing what'll set someone off. Some days Nate was fine. Other days it was like walking into a trap. You'd say something normal and he'd twist it. Once I asked if we had more gloves and he said if I didn't like how things were run, there were other fast food joints down the street. Did you ever report it? No point. The last guy who tried got written up for attitude, then his hours got cut." Cameron nodded once, taking it in. "You were efficient yesterday. You're reliable. That doesn't go unnoticed." Before Isaiah could respond, the door opened again and Fallon stepped in. She looked rested but cautious. Her eyes flicked from Isaiah to Cameron, then back. "I wasn't sure if I should come in today," she said, voice low. "You're exactly who I hoped would," Cameron replied. "Come sit." She hesitated, then joined them at the table. "I don't want to throw anyone under the bus," she said immediately. "You don't need to," Cameron said. "I've seen enough. Today's not about blame. It's about fixing what's broken." She glanced at Isaiah, then back at Cameron. "We can't run lunch with two people." "You won't have to," he said. "Temporary support is on the way from the training division. But we'll need a couple days to get permanent changes in place." "Who's managing until then?" she asked. "I am," Fallon blinked. "Seriously?" "Yes, I'll be here all week. Not as an owner, not as a guest, as acting store lead." Isaiah looked stunned. Fallon just leaned back slightly, absorbing it. The store opened at 9. The first wave of customers was light. Cameron worked the register, Isaiah handled prep, and Fallon took the grill. By 10:30, the lunch crowd started building. A woman in scrubs came in with a young boy. An older man with a cane followed, then a group of high schoolers. Cameron noticed the pace picking up and adjusted immediately, calling out to Fallon, "Switch me to grill. You handle point." She hesitated. "You sure?" "Yes, go." She stepped up front, and within minutes, the flow improved. Fallon moved between the register and the drink station with practiced ease. Isaiah worked steadily in the back, prepping extra trays before they ran out. Cameron focused on speed at the grill, keeping the queue moving without sacrificing quality. At noon, the temp manager arrived. Her name was Alyssa, a mid-40s training director with a calm demeanor and sharp eyes. She introduced herself to Isaiah and Fallon, then quietly observed for 20 minutes before pulling Cameron aside. "It's worse than the report said," she said quietly. "Whoever was running this store didn't just burn bridges, they salted the earth." "I know," Cameron replied. "That's why I'm staying." Alyssa nodded. "I'll handle back-end operations and scheduling. You stay on the floor." "Staff needs to see leadership, not oversight." Agreed. By mid-afternoon, the rhythm had settled. Customers came and went without incident. The kitchen was clean. Orders were accurate. Cameron noticed something else too. Fallon had started speaking more, not just to customers, but to Isaiah. Asking for help, offering tips, coordinating instead of carrying everything alone. After the rush, Fallon approached Cameron at the Fry station. "I didn't think it would feel this different." "Different how?" "People aren't flinching. No one's snapping." "I don't feel like I'm about to mess up just by existing." Cameron nodded. "That's the standard we should have had all along." She leaned against the counter briefly, then shifted her weight. "What's going to happen after this week, when you're gone?" "I'm assigning someone new to run this store. Someone who's trained in leading, not just managing. Someone from corporate. No, I want to promote from within if I can find the right person." Fallon looked up at him, startled. "You mean?" "I'm not offering anything yet." But I'm watching. She gave a small nod, then walked back to the front. Later in the break room, Alyssa reviewed the schedule with Isaiah, who had taken initiative and started writing down prep gaps and supply needs. "You've done this before?" she asked. "Not officially, I just kept track. In case I'd need to cover." "I'm adding you to the assistant track," she said. "If you're interested." Isaiah froze. "Really? You've got the right habits, and I trust habits more than resumes." He didn't reply right away, but his posture straightened. That evening, Cameron stayed after close. He helped mop, took out trash, and restocked the walk-in. He didn't delegate, he didn't supervise, he worked. As Fallon finished wiping down the grill, she looked over. "You didn't have to stay." "I did." She folded the cleaning cloth and set it down. "Most people in your position wouldn't even admit this place existed. That's the problem." She didn't argue. As the last light shut off and the locks clicked into place, Cameron stepped outside into the cool night air with Fallon and Isaiah. "I'll be back tomorrow morning," he said. "You don't trust us?" Isaiah asked with a half smile. "I do," Cameron said. "That's why I'm coming back. You've earned someone showing up." Fallon glanced at him. "What about the others? They'll see the change, or they won't. Either way, we're not going backwards." They nodded. And for the first time in months, Store 19 didn't feel like a place people escaped from. It felt like a place they could build from. By the end of the week, the changes had taken hold, not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because the people still standing had been given something they hadn't had in a long time: permission to care without punishment. Cameron arrived early again on Friday, dressed in the same uniform as the rest of the staff. He stopped by the kitchen first. The walk-in had been thoroughly cleaned, and new gloves, aprons, and supplies were neatly shelved. Isaiah had created a laminated chart for inventory restock tracking, and Alyssa had placed a clipboard near the back door for daily equipment checks. Fallon was already at the counter, checking the till. She didn't flinch when Cameron walked up beside her. "Isaiah's prepping cold station," she said, eyes still on the register. "We're short one tonight. The temp left early yesterday, family emergency." He nodded. "We'll split the shift. I'll rotate between grill and front." She didn't argue, just gave a quiet "okay" and returned to counting bills. At 10, the first customer came in, then another and another. Within 40 minutes, the store was full. Orders came in steady waves. Isaiah handled prep with a rhythm that kept the line flowing. Cameron took grill, letting Fallon manage the front. She worked smoothly, even when a family of 6 arrived with a complicated order and 2 substitutions. No one raised their voice. No one rolled their eyes. When the youngest kid dropped his drink near the soda station, Fallon handed him a napkin and helped clean it up without a word. At one point, a man in a gray blazer approached the counter. He had a slight impatience in his tone when he asked for the manager. Cameron turned from the grill. "How can I help?" The man gestured toward the dining area. "I've been coming here for years. It's been rough for a while. But today this is how it should have always run. I just wanted to say that." Fallon glanced at Cameron after the man left. That's the first time anyone said something like that in months. They didn't dwell on it. Orders kept coming. After the rush, Cameron stepped into the back and found Isaiah reviewing the prep sheet against the new inventory binder. "Have you thought about the assistant position?" Cameron asked. "I have," Isaiah said, pen still in hand. "I'd take it, but only if I can still be hands-on. I don't want to get pushed behind a desk." "You'd stay in rotation, you'd train others, lead by example." Isaiah nodded slowly. "Then yeah, I'm in." Cameron tapped the binder. "We'll start formal training next week. You'll shadow Alyssa every second day." Isaiah didn't say anything, but his grip on the pen tightened just slightly. Later that evening, Fallon sat on a crate near the back door, sipping from a paper cup. Cameron stepped outside, letting the door swing shut behind him. The air was mild, dusk just starting to settle. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, eyes on the parking lot. "I didn't think I'd make it to the end of this month. I thought I was going to have to leave." "You made it." She let out a slow breath. "I've never had a real plan before. Just survive the week, that's it." You ever think about staying longer term, moving into a lead role? I don't know, she said. I'm not like the ones who usually get promoted. I'm not polished. I don't have a degree. You've been holding this place together. That counts for more than polish. She looked at him, unsure. I'm not offering you anything today, he added, but I want you to think about what you'd do if someone made space for you to lead, not just manage a shift, actually lead. She looked away, then back. You're serious, completely? She nodded once. Nothing more. At close, the team cleaned down in silence. Not tense silence, the kind that comes from focus, not dread. Cameron wiped counters while Isaiah broke down boxes. Fallon disinfected the drink station. There was no shouting. No rush to escape, just the rhythm of work being done right. After the last trash bag was tied, Cameron gathered them in the break room. I wanted to say something before we go, he said. I've seen a lot of stores. I've seen what happens when people lose trust, when leadership fails and the good ones get buried. That happened here, and I let it go on too long because I didn't look for myself. He looked at each of them. That won't happen again. Not here, not anywhere. Isaiah sat forward slightly, listening. Fallon kept her arms folded but didn't look away. There's going to be more changes, Cameron continued. You'll get the tools you need, restocked equipment, paid overtime, a schedule that doesn't punish reliability. He turned to Fallon. You'll have 2 days off next week. Consecutive. Non-negotiable. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Finally, she gave a small nod. And Isaiah, he added, will file your assistant onboarding Monday morning. Alyssa will run point, but I'll sign off personally. Isaiah gave a single, quiet, okay. Cameron leaned against the table. This store won't be fixed in a week, but it's no longer broken by the same hands that caused the damage. That's the difference. He reached into his bag and pulled out 3 sealed envelopes. These are one-time bonuses, not for performance, for endurance. For showing up when everything around you told you not to. He handed one to each of them. Neither Fallon nor Isaiah opened theirs right away. You earned these. And you don't owe anyone an explanation. After a pause, Isaiah asked, what's going to happen to the other stores? They're getting reviewed. Quietly, I've got other people going in like I did here. No warnings, no filters. Fallon raised an eyebrow. Undercover, he gave a small shrug. Sometimes you need to see it for yourself. She looked down at the envelope in her hands, then back up. Do they know what's coming? They will. They stood in silence for a moment longer. Then Fallon stood and picked up her bag. See you Monday. I'll be here, Cameron said. Isaiah followed her out, holding the door open without saying anything. Cameron stayed behind for a moment, looking around the room. The chairs were tucked in. The floors were clean. The clock ticked quietly above the whiteboard with next week's schedule still half filled. He picked up a marker and wrote at the top, "No one gets left behind, not anymore." Then he capped the marker, turned out the light, and locked the door behind him. For the first time in months, Store 19 wasn't surviving, it was starting over.